Make this video, which is about my brother who has rentals in Washington State and in California. And on his rentals in California, he didn't raise the rent since 2006. Now, I'm the guy that came up with the binder strategy. This is how you get your tenants to ask you to raise the rent. It's one of the reasons why I've been able to find cash flowing rentals on the MLS, right? I don't have any secrets to finding real estate. I just talk to a real estate agent, have them set up an auto search, and I find my properties on the MLS. No driving for dollars, no creative financing, no mailers, none of the things that people can do to have more access to more potential rentals. So, good morning, Cody. Looking forward to seeing you at the Robinhood event here in a few hours today. That's why I'm doing this video before I head out there. I made sure Michael Zuber wasn't live at 7:30 this morning, so I wasn't going at the same time, because it's one of those days of the week where he takes it off. But my brother has rentals from 2006. He hasn't raised the rent. Now, I don't want to say anything negative about my brother because he's not here to defend himself. When we do videos together, we are pretty honest with each other and give each other a lot of ammunition to attack the other. So I'm not going to say anything negative about him. And if I start going down the rabbit hole of negative things, I will stop myself. What you say about somebody when they're not in the room is so much more important than what you say when they're in the room. It's pretty much how I judge everybody. So I don't want to say anything negative. He purchased his properties using a home equity line of credit on his house and then paid off the HELOC to rinse and repeat and buy it again until he got to 10 rentals and then retired at the age of 50. One of the main reasons I don't want to say anything negative about him and that I try to when we're together is because he's so much better at everything than me. He's always made more money, been better looking, got his rentals sooner, retired earlier. He can sing and play the guitar. So if you ever get together with us, bring a guitar. Just better at me than everything. So when I started buying rentals using a mortgage, he would, of course, use our familial term of love and call me a moron. Because who could do this with debt, right? No, he would use his HELOC, pay it off, buy another one, fix it up, rent it out. So he had paid off rentals that in 2006, the rents made sense. So we had one tenant at $625. That's one tenant paying $625 a month since 2006. Now it's paid off property, and in his mind, his mortgage stayed the same because it was paid off. He had another tenant at $700 a month. This tenant might have moved in a year or two after 2006, might be why they're paying more. He actually has a tenant. Now his house is in California, he's got three. One of the tenants is paying $800 a month, and I might be wrong there. It might be like $820 or $8 something, but it's 8 is the star, is the handle on it, right? And that tenant moved in a couple of years ago, like 2022 or 2020 or something. It was pretty recent compared to 2006. Area average rents, where his properties are, $1,500 for a 2-bedroom. And people go, oh, you can't do that in California. Well, of course you can't do that in LA or San Francisco, but he's out in Rosamond, California, right? It's the devil's armpit. Pretty much where I grew up. And so $1,500 for a 2-bedroom. Yeah, there's some nicer 2-bedrooms that go for more, and his are nice, but this is what he could be getting. He had a tenant turnover, and because the tenant was somewhere around 625, 700, he went to that 800 and something because that was a big increase in his mind. He had a tenant turnover, which means he had a vacant unit. He did flooring and paint and updated electric and all the stuff that you do when you have a tenant turnover. It looked nice. I saw the place. Actually, it might be the place that I lived in when I got out of the Marines and was homeless for a while. But after being homeless when I moved in there. That's how his brain works. I'm not saying it's negative. I'm just saying, I'm not saying anything bad. He had tenants in the 600 or 700 range in 2006. when rents were more than that. So he was below area average. He had a tenant turnover, so he put a new tenant in who had no idea what the other tenant was paying. And an increase to that 800 and something was huge. That tenant's still there. This is when rents were probably 13 or 1400. So this is significantly below area average. But recently, I have finally convinced my brother that, and it probably became a conversational topic with us because nationwide rent control was threatened. And in California, one of the reasons why he was able to leave his rents where they were is because most people say, well, California has rent control already. How would nationwide rent control impact him? Rent control in California, rent control period, not legally by definition, but common sense wise, forces landlords to raise the rent. Because if his rents were this, and then property taxes doubled or tripled, or Prop 13 changed in California, or homeowners insurance, like it is almost everywhere, canceled policies so you have to renew at a higher rate, became so much that he'd be losing money, he could go make a rent adjustment. That's one of the reasons why he was able to leave his rent alone, is because his properties, being single family houses and not in a LLC, aren't rent controlled. So know your local laws, because just because it's in California doesn't mean it has rent control. So in this last couple of months, I've talked to my brother and I made a binder for him. So the binder strategy actually gets your tenants to ask you to raise the rent. And there's several videos here on YouTube on how to do that, so I'm not going to go into the details of how it works. I'm going to cover how his worked. I created a binder strategy that showed Section 8 for a 2-bedroom in his county and his zip code pays around $1,300. So Section 8 would pay 13. Area average is 15. BAH, because Edwards Air Force Base is not too far from there, for an E5 is higher than where he's at. So I gave him all this data. I printed out several rentals in the area that are 2-bedroom, 1-bath, exactly like the ones he has rented out. That are, 1,400 was the low one, 1,600, 1,700 was the high one. I printed out 4 or 5 of those. So we had a binder, that's why we call it the 3-ring binder, that had what is Section 8 paying, what is the military BAH, so basic allowance for housing in the area, covering for an E5, which is generally what you want to go off of. How much are rentals that are similar to his rentals in the area going for, share it with the tenants. Before going to California, he did the binder strategy 3 times in Washington. There is no R. In Washington, he did the binder strategy 3 times with the intent of not raising the rents. I call these his practice runs. He fired his property manager in Washington, and he's going to be self-managing his rental. So he's going to communicate with his tenants face-to-face instead of a landlord introduction letter. He just went face-to-face and said, you're no longer with the property management. Here's how you contact me for repairs and maintenance. Here's how I collect rents. And let me do this thing called the binder that my brother talks about. He showed them what rents are, what Section 8 pays, what basic allowance for housing is, pardon me, in our area, that they are significantly below area average rents. And then he left the rent the same. He didn't ask the magic question at the end that the binder strategy functions on. He just said, these are the things I want you to be aware of, in case in a year or 2 we talk about the rents. This was his first time ever doing the binder, so we got practice of what is it like to talk to a tenant in their house, showing them how much more rents are, how much the government would pay us if you moved out, how much better the landlord's life would be if you left. But we don't want you to leave because we don't like tenant turnover. We don't want to displace a tenant. We're happy that you live here. So he has, from those 3 binder strategies in Washington, 3 extremely happy tenants because their rent didn't change. They didn't get kicked out. They now are educated on how much rents actually are. And my brother got the practice of doing the binder strategy where he wasn't worried about the outcome. So he goes to California. He does the binder strategy on the 6/25, and they said, I would like to take a day to think about it. He did the binder strategy on the 700. He is not doing the binder strategy on the tenant that's at 800 and something, even though area average rents are 1,500. Since that tenant moved in recently, within the last few years, at that 800 and something, he's okay with it. So the 700 comes back and says, how about we go to 1,000? If my brother walked in and said, I'm the landlord. Now, he's interacted with California, which is weird. He lives in Washington. He self-managed the California rentals the whole time. I don't think he's ever had property management there. He does have a tenant placement service property management company that he works with, but he manages because he likes to have the reason to go to California, not to see all the girls that he knows there, but to go to California and work on his rentals. Makes it a tax write-off. We have another brother that lives there. He gets to hang out with him. So it's kind of why he self-manages that. Not sure why he didn't do it in Washington. See, there's no R. So the tenant says, how about $1,000 from $700? If David walked in and said, I'm the landlord, I want to raise your rent $100, right? 700 going up 100 is a significant increase. The tenants could freak out. The tenants could go into panic mode. Why are you raising the rent? We've lived here since 2006-ish, and you've never raised the rent. We've gone like over a decade and a half. Why are you raising the rent all of a sudden? He'd be this complete jerk. Wouldn't have went well. They might have understood because they've been getting a deal for a long time, but the odds are just raising the rent, like most landlords do, would make him a jerk. Instead, he shows them. Section 8 would pay around $1,300. Here's all the rentals in the area for $1,500. They're the same of ours. Here's what BAH would be. The magic question, he said, what do you think would be fair? And they said $1,000. David, being who he is, said, that'd be nice, but how about we go $950? Because he was uncomfortable with a $300 increase. Totally makes sense. I've done the same. The last one was, she was $1,500. Area average was 21. She suggested $1,850, and I said, how about 17? So we went from 15 to 17. It was like a $200 increase, but we didn't go up as high as we could. So, but this is about his experience. So he goes from 950. He goes from 700 to 950. Us $250, right? If I do the math right. So $250 increase. If he said it's going up 100, he's a jerk. Tenant says, how about 300? And he says, how about 250? Happy tenant. Happy tenants don't trash the property. Happy tenants don't leave. So the 625 comes back the next day, and they ask for 900, and he agrees. He says, I will acquiesce to your request. So this is a $275 increase. So I respect my brother that he had tenants for so long at these low rents. I totally get it. He was like, it was enough money for me. It covers expenses on the property. I'm not trying to be super rich. It's what I need. But expenses, roofing materials, he's replacing swamp coolers, which is a thing, still exists in parts of the country. This week, he's replacing swamp coolers. The expense of materials have gone up. Handyman, labor, every expense that there is associated with owning a rental property has gone up, but his rents hadn't. So instead of going in and just raising the rents and having his tenants super upset because he raised the rent, he had a 10-minute conversation twice and then waited for the text message from the tenant saying, how about 900? How do you feel about that? And he says, sure, let's go with that. So he is now making $525 more a month in perpetuity because of two 10-minute conversations. He also has happy tenants. He's below area average. Tenants are still getting a good deal. And the most important thing, he had to send me a text. And this had to hurt. This had to really bother him. He had to send me a text that said, hey, Dion. Oh, this must have sucked. He had to say, Dion, your strategy worked. Have a day full of awesome.